Welcome into Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast. It is Monday, April 3rd. Yes, we are with you on Mondays this season. If you've yet to find out the news, Payoff Pitch coming to you 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, and Friday during the baseball season. We look forward to having you with us throughout the spring, summer, and into the fall. Today, myself, Brendan Glasheen, joined by Sean Zerillo and BJ Cunningham to break down today's slate, couple of afternoon games, and then a bunch going on this evening. Rate, review, subscribe. We'd greatly appreciate it. Zerillo, I'll go to you first. We'll start with best bets. And as we like to normally do, Sean Zerillo, throughout the baseball season this year, opening pitch, his new column, his daily column will be available on the Action Network app, actionnetwork.com. What jumps out to you on the slate today for a best bet?
I was prepared to say a rare 15-game Monday slate, but it looks like we have 15-game Monday slates for at least the next 2 Mondays. So typically an off day, getaway day where teams are traveling to different cities, but we are getting a loaded 15-game slate and a lot of potential options for where to go. But my favorite bet is the Baltimore Orioles, particularly on the full game money line, but I like them in both halves. You could play their first 5 money line to plus 116. Their full game money line just a bit lower to plus 113 is where I would set my cutoff price target. A lot of this matchup comes down to how close you project Kyle Bradish and Jon Gray, because in terms of the bullpens, the defenses for the two teams see those as relative washes. The Orioles are the better team against right-handed pitching. The Rangers are a better team against left-handed pitching. So the Orioles getting the better of the splits on both ends of the offensive and pitching matchups. So slight edge for Baltimore there. Home field advantage for Texas. Everything else comes down to the two starting pitchers. Jon Gray, 3.7 expected ERA last season. Kyle Bradish, 4.5 in his rookie year. But in terms of how I project these pitchers for 2023, I have them relatively comparable. Bradish, 4-pitch guy, massive potential. Sort of come down to how quickly and how well he refines his command of that 4-pitch arsenal. But he has multiple above-average offerings. I view him as a pretty comparable pitcher to Jon Gray heading into his sophomore season. So I projected the Orioles around a pick'em price in this matchup. As I said, I like them down to plus 116 for the first 5, plus 113 for the full game. But they are my favorite bet and my largest projected edge for Monday's slate. There's some other underdogs we'll get to, but the Orioles probably my favorite.
And Bradish, looking back at the end of 2022, he finished stronger than he had started the year against some pretty quality teams in the American League, Cleveland, Toronto, Houston. Finished up well against the Yankees. I will ask you, because I saw you put this in the app, the Action app, ahead of time, and you got a way better number. It's at a lot of places 112, it's hovering in that 112, 115 range. Is that okay with you, or do you change a unit size based on how you go about it?
Yeah, I would just reduce the unit size slightly. So I put 3/4 of a unit on it. The numbers I got, which was above plus 130. I believe I said below plus 125 or something like that, to reduce your unit size. So if it's an edge greater than about 4% for me, I'll bump up my bets a little bit. If it's between that 2%, 4% mark, I'll generally just stick a half unit on it. So that's why you'll see my unit sizes fluctuate ever so slightly. But yeah, in that plus 115 range, it would just be closer to a normal half unit bet for me.
Okay, very good. BJ, what do you got for this big Monday slate?
Yeah, I like the Diamondbacks for the first 5 innings. Best numbers plus 115, which you can find at BetMGM. Ryan Weathers is going to be on the mound for the Padres. He pitched 3 2/3 innings in the big leagues last season because he spent a majority of the time in AAA after he had not a very good 2021 season, over a 5 xERA. But let me read off his numbers in AAA to you, Brendan, here really quick.
Please do.
And this is, he had a 6.54 xFIP, a 4.17 walk per 9 rate, a 2.27 home run per 9 rate, and opposing hitters had a 325 average against him. And that was over 123 inning sample size. So he is a very, very below average pitcher. I'm not really sure why he's in the rotation here. The Diamondbacks were bad overall against lefties last season, but against left-handed fastballs, sliders, and changeups, which are Weathers' 3 only pitches, they did have a 250 expected batting average and 330 expected weighted on base average, which is somewhere around the major league average. Ryan Nelson's going to be on the mound for the Diamondbacks. He was really good in 3 starts in the big leagues towards the end of last season. Went 18 innings, 2.24 xERA, 2.34 expected weighted on base average allowed. He's a heavy, heavy fastball pitcher. And that's not really a big worry against the Padres because last season they were near the bottom of Major League Baseball against fastballs, minus 21.9 run value, and especially against right-handed fastballs. They only had a 239 expected batting average and 328 expected weighted on base average. So I'm not sure how long Weathers is going to go. He might only see the lineup one time, and they might just get him out of there. But given how bad his numbers were in AAA, and the fact that Nelson's ERA, if you look at a lot of projection models, projects about a half run lower, I don't think there's any reason why the Diamondbacks should be sitting at this high of a dog. So I like them for the first 5 innings at plus 115.
So can you explain to me why they're doing this? Like, I know Darvish is hurt, or pardon me, Musgrove's hurt. Why are they doing this game 4 into the year, 3 into the year?
That might be a question for Sean Zerillo because I am not sure, honestly.
All right. I know it's a long season. They're 2-2, but it's early. Why are they pitching this guy? He's not even listed in their rotation. They're already doing the bullpen day thing.
I guess so.
Yeah. So definitely the Musgrove injury. He's also 23 years old, former first-round pick. So they see something there, right? But they brought him up 2 years ago when their pitching completely fell apart. They had to stick him on the 40-man roster. I haven't looked at their 40-man. I'm not sure what other starting pitching depth they have, but I would imagine it just comes down to he's already on their 40-man roster. They don't want to add somebody else to the 40-man roster, so he's available, and they probably only need him to start once. It seems like Musgrove is progressing pretty quickly. So I'd imagine Weathers is just going to get the one start, maybe a second one, and then get sent down and replaced by Musgrove. But yeah, probably just comes down to them not wanting to add another player to tie up their 40-man roster, and they're just using what they have available.
Gotcha.
Your best ability is your availability, Brendan.
Yes.
Padres coming into the year, 6-man rotation was the plan. They call, just reading up in the San Diego Union Tribune, that Weathers is considered as one of the leading candidates of what would be called the next 6. So the next 6. That's what BJ is fading today with the D-backs for the first.
You know, and I think they would hope too that they can get him enough innings this year, right, where they may be able to develop something to the point where come playoff time, not going to be necessary in the rotation, but maybe he's a bullpen fireman and can turn over a lineup once as a lefty. So you see a lot of these teams, the Cardinals, they bring up young pitchers through their bullpen, try to work on stuff, but it's really just about getting guys innings so they're ready for the end of the season. The Padres, we talked about, they're a very safe team to make the playoffs, just given the talent level they have. They should make the playoffs more than 80% of the time. So getting their guys ready for the end of the season is part of their player development strategy in season.
That's fair. Oh, I hear you. I wish the young man luck. I just couldn't believe to see, like, they have all these names they acquired in the offseason, and they're going to this kid in the first run through the rotation. Let's find out if we're going to fade the public today. The Yankees are at home hosting the Philadelphia Phillies. Phillies just got swept by the Texas Rangers on the road. Money coming in on New York, 84% of the bets, 77% of the dollars on the Yankees. Zerillo, are the Phillies, I know the Phillies win totals and off to a good start. The win total under, that is off to a good start. But do the Phillies have a chance to bounce back? What are your thoughts on this particular matchup based on where the money's coming in?
Yeah, I'd lean to the Yankees first 5 in this matchup. Nestor Cortez, a guy who my model was pointing me to bet on during his initial ascension in the Yankees rotation. I think the market caught up with him last year, but he generates a lot of weak contacts. So he's a guy who on his strikeout numbers, I think the market sort of missed. But on StatCast data, if you were paying attention to more advanced metrics, he was a guy that you would have been on. Taijuan Walker, seemingly a different guy every half season. If you look at his career splits, hard to know where he's at coming into this year, but his spring training numbers and his WBC numbers performance was not all that encouraging. Didn't love how he looked. Could have just been getting ready for the season. So it's tough to discount him too much. But if you can get minus 152 or better, I prefer minus 150 is a nice even number on the Yankees first 5. I think that is a fine bet. Otherwise, I'm happy to pass here. Playing about half the board, I would say, on a day-to-day basis. It looks like thus far this year, just worth commenting. I feel like the market has tightened relative to the past couple of years. I'm curious if BJ thinks the same too regarding his model and when he's checking these games each day. But I feel like we're playing roughly one bet for every 2 games, whether that's a side or a total or a first 5, what have you. But it seems like for every 15 games, we're playing about 7 or 8 bets so far.
Yeah, I mean, like to speak to that, I when I go through it, I hear like I'm just looking at like my edge screen. I have for full game, like I have like 2 or 3 like edges on the board right now, given where the odds are at right now. And then even for like totals, like full game totals, I don't really have much value anywhere. So I agree. The market is tightened. First 5, I'm still working on a couple different things. So I'm showing a little bit more edge on money lines there. So like to Sean's point, like I had the Yankees at -156 for the first 5 innings. So I'm maybe a little bit lower on Nestor Cortez. And it really just comes down to, I think, what you think of Taijuan Walker. Like Sean mentioned, he did not have a good spring training or WBC. And last season, for the first time in his career since we introduced StatCast data, he had an xERA under 4. So do you project him to actually go forward as a under 4 type pitcher, or is he the Taijuan Walker that goes more near a 4.5? So if he's more near the 4.5, then you could potentially show some value here on the Yankees. But again, the Phillies were really good against left-handed pitching last season. So for me, I'm with Sean. I'm also passing on this game.
Okay, and by the way, I don't know if I said this off the top. We are presented by BetMGM. So, folks, all of the lines that we reference on the show, if we reference lines, we're looking at BetMGM for a payoff pitch. Let's move on to underdogs of the day and where we might find value there. A game we already did discuss. The Diamondbacks, Zerillo, are a team you're targeting. You got another one as well.
Yeah, I think BJ and I are in agreement as to 2 dogs we really like on this card. So I'm going to talk about the D-backs and Reds, and then BJ is going to continue talking about the Reds. So BJ mentioned the Diamondbacks matchup. Ryan Weathers, we talked about extensively now, but Ryan Nelson is a guy I like a lot, 3 above average pitches. I view him as a vastly superior starting pitcher. The Padres have the advantages in the bullpen. And offensively, the Diamondbacks are a clear-cut top 3 or top 5 defensive and base running team for me. You saw them wreak havoc on the base pass yesterday against Noah Syndergaard, who is the easiest guy ever to steal off of, but that probably ultimately won them the game. Corbin Carroll stealing 3 bases. We talk extensively about McCarthy, Carroll, Alec Thomas, Ketel Marte. They have a lot of speed on this team, and they're going to frustrate teams who do not have catchers who could throw people out or who cannot hold runners. The Texas Rangers, very much the same too, if you watch their series with the Phillies. But Arizona, first 5 down to +111, full game to +124. Both of those bets for me on top of the Orioles, as I mentioned, my favorite bet, my favorite underdog bet. Another underdog I really like, though, and BJ will get to in a second, the Cincinnati Reds. I would play them on the full game money line down to +102. I also see value on their first 5 line. I will get to that more in a minute because I think there's a better way to play it. But in terms of the Reds specifically as a side, they project better for me against lefties than righties. So they're getting the better of the splits matchup against Drew Smyly. I also project Connor Overton as a slightly superior pitcher to Drew Smyly. So I actually give the Reds a starting pitching advantage. The bullpen, surprisingly to me, are pretty close. Chicago, the better defensive and base running team. Cincinnati, much worse. But even factoring that in, given the red splits, I actually see value on them. As I said, down to about +102 in the first half. There's also values on the over and the Reds' first 5 in this game. Those sort of correlate to another way to play the Reds, but I want to let BJ go away. Go ahead, I should say, and give his take on why he likes the Reds today as well.
Yeah.
Go away, BJ.
Not go away. Go ahead.
Please go away,
Yeah,
BJ.
I mean,
kindly leave.
Sean mentioned it. I mean, Connor Overton, if you look at expected ERA from last season, was a better pitcher than Drew Smyly. Drew Smyly did overperform by a little over half a run, 3.47 ERA versus a 4.17 xERA. And now he's 33. So he projects to be more of a 4.5 ERA type pitcher by most projection models. And Connor Overton, he was only a 33 inning sample size, but 3.41 xERA, 312 expected weighted on base average allowed, 251 expected batting average allowed. So he was a halfway decent pitcher for the Reds last season. He's got a 5-pitch arsenal that he can use each pitch at least 12% of the time. So he can mix his pitches well against the Cubs lineup. And the Reds, like Sean mentioned, they were much better against lefties than they were against righties last season. And with Drew Smyly, you're going to get a ton of curveballs. That's his main pitch. It's why he's been successful. Well, the Reds were about average in Major League Baseball against curveballs last season. I'm going to go over the first 5 at +105. I project the Reds at -111 for the first 5 innings. The only reason I'm doing that is because the Reds closer Diaz has pitched the last 2 days. So I don't know if he's going to be available potentially today. And that scares me with the rest of the Reds bullpen beyond him. But Mark Leiter Jr. is also not going to pitch for the Cubs. He's pitched the last 2 days as well. So he's been actually projects to be one of their better bullpen guys as well. So two of the better relievers in each bullpen are out for this game. So I'm going to target the Reds for the first 5 because I do not really. I mean, I've already bet the Reds at a full game at a better number, which has come down now. But for the Reds for the first 5 to avoid a Diaz-less bullpen, I think is a better play here.
Feels like luck might be more on the Red side this April based on how it went last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why
It could
not?
be worse, right?
Happy they're off to a 2-1 start. I mean, seriously, like maybe that is something to keep in mind. We talk, you guys have your models and you make your adjustments and you run through things. I would imagine like the Reds altogether weren't very lucky in terms of their expected numbers versus their actual numbers, but maybe it comes around for them in the month of April.
There's no team that's bad enough Major League Baseball to go 3-22 and have it actually be like justified. Honestly,
right. That's true too.
that's yeah.
They're actually bad. That's the problem.
They're bad. They're just not 3-22 bad.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
All right, so let's go to our final bets for this Monday. Sorry, and I'm all over the place right now. My computer's acting up, so I apologize. I'm like rattled right now. Anyway, Zerillo, you talked about the Reds too. You've got a couple more plays. So does BJ, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, so BJ likes the Reds for the first 5 innings. I do as well. But I think there's actually a better way to play it because I like both the Reds and the first 5 over. So when I see the double edge right on a side and a total within the same half, typically you will find a correlated edge on the derivative team total that is bigger than the individual edges on either the money line or the total themselves. So the Reds first 5 team total over 1.5 runs. I bet that at -145. I like it all the way up to -160. You could also bet it at 2 -120. Projected it closer to 2.5. So if you got even a 2.5 plus 120, I'm okay playing that as well. Probably closer to plus 130 than plus 120, but a bunch of different numbers you could bet it at depending on the juice. I just think given my projected edges for both the Reds money line for the first 5 and the first 5 over, the bigger edge on the Reds first 5 team total, just the way to go about it. But no issue playing either the first 5 over 4.5 to -115 or the Reds first 5 money line to plus 101. Those are all viable bets. Just given the price targets I gave out on the team total, I sort of set them at a boundary where you would be betting them at equivalent numbers to the best available number for either the money line or the total itself. So just in terms of how I analyzed that game, I thought it was interesting. Brendan, I brought up the MMA analogy on the last podcast too. I just want to compare it to when I show value on a fighter's money line, the over in a fight, and the fighter's decision prop. I just take the decision prop for the fighter because the correlated edges on the over and the money line generally going to lead me to a bigger edge on the decision prop. So sort of the same thing that ties in. Find those derivatives that match up with the edges you're already projecting. Other games left on board for me. The Pirates and the Red Sox over 9.5. I believe this was the only total that I bet. The Pirates offense, I think, is a little bit underrated. I know they struggled to score last year. O'Neal Cruz just seems so much more mature this year. Everybody's looking at him like he's a star, and he's acting like a star. I know that's a little weird to say, but the energy around Cruz and that Pirates team, they're all looking at him like he is a superstar. It seems like there's a maturity level, a leadership level with him that has grown. But they added Andrew McCutchen in the offseason, Carlos Santana, brought Jihan Bay from overseas. I like the other bats in their lineup, Brian Hayes, Jack Sawinski had a lot of homers last year. So Cannon Smith-Njigba, too, was one of, I believe, 2 rookies by one projection system who actually projected as above average rookies this year. They're a fairly deep lineup. The Red Sox, I think, are also just going to be an over team all year. You saw that series with the Orioles. They have a good offense. Their pitching is sketchy. So a lot of these Red Sox games, I think, are going to be high scoring. I like the over 9.5 in Boston today, up to -105. And then lastly, a team who I bet in both halves, the team who I've been low on all offseason with the Chicago White Sox, first 5 and full game. First 5 to -135 is fine. Full game to -125 would be my cutoff. The gap in projected ERA, model weighted ERA for me for the 2 starting pitchers is not that drastic. It's less than half a run. And I actually view the White Sox as a better offense against righties than lefties, but I still see an edge on them in both halves. So that surprised me, given I don't really see any sort of drastic differential in any aspect of the matchup, but altogether, it's a bigger edge than I was expecting going into it, because I'm very low on the White Sox this season. So there's something with the Giants' defensive base running metrics. They don't have a single hitter position player that projects as an above average defender or base runner for me. And that is very concerning. I guess they've guys who are closer to average base runners, but not a single above average or even average defender on that roster. So the Giants, on a game-to-game basis, a team I'm going to be going against, I imagine, a lot this season, just based on the first 4 or 5 days of projections. But White Sox minus 135 at 5, minus 125 full game. That would be the end of my bets for Monday. I think I'd have a bet on the Twins first 5 too, though, that I just didn't include in there.
BJ, you as well have a case for the Orioles first 5 full game. If you want to echo some of what,
yeah, I mean, it's like what Sean mentioned. I'm just going to echo basically what Sean mentioned. It's basically what you think of Kyle Bradish. He obviously pitched a little better towards the end of last season. So, I grabbed the Orioles a little earlier, like Sean mentioned. I have them at plus 115 for the full game, plus 110 for the first 5 innings. So just showing a little bit of edge there. The other game I'm targeting that Sean just mentioned, the Twins first 5, which is now down to minus 125. I project them at minus 152 for the first 5 innings.
Yep.
Tyler Mahle, big time positive regression candidate, 4.4 ERA last year, 3.49 xERA. That's actually the 3rd straight season he's been under a 3.8 expected ERA. So obviously a lot of the StatCast numbers shows that he is well above average pitcher. And Johnny Cueto is going to be on the mound, Brendan, and he is now 37 years old. Last season, he had a great season with the White Sox. One of his better seasons, honestly, since 2016. He had a 3.35 ERA, a 4.02 expected ERA. He had a walk per 9 rate under 2. He obviously doesn't strike anybody out really that much anymore, but he is somebody, I believe, with the pitch clock, is going to start to regress. He can't just mess with hitters' timings, take forever on the mound. He's got to be a lot quicker. So I think that's going to actually hinder him going forward. So I think you're getting a pitcher who's in Mahle, who's at least a half a run, maybe 0.75 runs better than Johnny Cueto. So I like the Twins for the first 5 at minus 125 at BetMGM.
I think the lack of shift hurts Cueto as well. Just the strikeouts being 5.8 per 9 innings at this point in his career, 15% strikeout rate. That is so low considering the number of balls that are going to be put in play, and the Marlins are not a good defensive team.
Yeah.
Our friend Charlie DeSturco is also on Minnesota, and he actually mentioned Cueto's age in his little action write-up. Also, for those interested, before we wrap up the show, Matt Mitchell is one of our audio producers here at Action Network, and I couldn't help myself, but I just popped open the old Twitter machine. And Matt Mitchell from 5 minutes ago. Kids finally back in school after spring break. A fellow dad in full Brewers gear rolls up at 7:54 a.m. in a minivan. The boys are back in town on blast. That's all the handicap I needed. 1:10 p.m. local first pitch time. Brewers run line plus 177. Hashtag roll out the barrel. Brewers Mets first game of the day on this Monday.
He's down on minus 2.5. What a coward.
That's just couldn't help.
What a coward.
So, enjoy the game, starting with Brewers and Mets at 1:10. Well, I think that's 2:10 Eastern, but anyway, that's the first game on the slate. For BJ Gunningham and Sean Zerillo, Brendan Glasheen, reminder, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday during the season. So we look forward to having more. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning. Thanks for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast, presented by BetMGM.